In my early 20s, I worked as a construction worker and engineer around the Philadelphia area. My coworkers and I handled fairly standard jobs, mostly expanding existing buildings, such as adding basements beneath structures that were already standing. In 2012, one of our projects involved building a small basement and extending the main floor of a corner dental office. The basement was planned to include a bathroom and 2 large storage rooms. We were moving along quickly, and by the time this incident happened, the basement already had functioning lights installed. The basement had recently been fully sealed, meaning the large opening in the ground was gone. Since the lighting was operational, we were able to work down there even after dark. One of my coworkers, Jordan, had gone upstairs and then outside to help with the extension work on the exterior of the building. I stayed behind, messing around with some of the electrical components. I was not a trained electrician, but I knew enough to handle basic tasks safely. Without warning, the power suddenly shut off. I was certain it was not caused by anything I had touched. My first thought was that the surrounding area must have lost power. None of us kept our phones on us while working because of how physical and dirty the job was. We usually left them in our jackets upstairs, but we did carry flashlights in our work vests. Before I could even reach for mine, I heard a strange rattling sound. The closest way I can describe it is like a bag of coins being shaken. Not exactly the same, but similar. The sound seemed to be coming from the small bathroom. It was still being finished. I pulled the flashlight from the pocket of my vest, switched it on, and pointed it toward the bathroom area. A door had already been installed, and it was partly closed, blocking my view inside. It did not sound like anything related to the building itself, so I assumed one of my coworkers was messing around. I stepped closer to the door and placed my hand along its edge. I paused for a moment before opening it, trying to steady myself. When I finally pulled the door open, my flashlight illuminated a person dressed entirely in black, standing in the corner of the cramped room with their face turned away. That changed when the figure snapped their head around like a deer startled in the woods. The only thing I could see was the reflection of their eyes in the beam of my flashlight. I slammed the door shut and sprinted up the stairs in my heavy boots, desperately searching for my coworkers. They were all outside, apparently getting ready to clean up and end the night since the power had gone out in all the surrounding buildings. I counted 3 coworkers, which meant none of them could have been the person in that small room. I asked if anyone else who worked in that building had stopped by at any point that evening. They all said no, which meant I had to bring them downstairs to show them the unsettling stranger in the basement. They followed me down to the small room, and just as I had feared, the person I saw was gone, not just from the room, but from the entire basement. I felt embarrassed when they did not believe me, but I was not about to force the issue or argue with them. We went back outside and finished packing up. Since I was the one who had the building key, I was responsible for locking up after everyone left. Once I got into my car and watched the others drive away, I felt something I cannot fully explain. A strong urge came over me, pushing me to go back down into the basement and check one last time for the person I knew I had seen. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, unlocked the building, and headed back down to the basement. The power was still off, so I walked down the stairs using 2 light sources, the flashlight I already had and the light from my phone. I reached the bottom step and then stopped. The complete silence of the narrow, unfinished basement, combined with the expectation that I might hear something, made me panic. I was just about to turn around and head back upstairs when I heard the rattling sound again, coming from the same small room. I did not even look. The moment I heard it, my heart jumped into my throat and I rushed back up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind me. I locked the building and drove straight home. Thankfully, it was a Saturday, so I did not have to return till Monday. From that point on, I made sure never to work alone in that basement again. We finished the project within a few weeks, and nothing else truly strange ever happened after that. It was an ordinary night during the cold month of February. My wife and I were lying in bed, watching a movie late at night before going to sleep. Partway through the movie, the television suddenly shut off, and the room was plunged into darkness. Both of us groaned at the same time in frustration. The lamps, the clocks, everything powered down, so it was clear the electricity had gone out. I told my wife I would step outside to see if the neighbors had lost power as well. I opened the front door and stood on the stoop for only a moment or two because of how cold it was, but I could clearly see lights on in nearby houses. It looked like we were the only ones without power. We have a fuse box located in a small boiler-style room in our basement. It did not seem likely that was the problem, but I had no other ideas. I figured it was worth checking anyway. I grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs. One strange thing about our house is that you walk down the stairs directly to the basement door, since the door itself is on the basement level. I was tired, so I slowly trudged down the steps without much urgency. When I reached the basement door, I turned the handle and tried to push it open. It did not move at all. I tried again with more force, but the door still refused to open. I assumed my wife must have locked it. I went back upstairs to ask her where she had put the basement key. She got out of bed and told me she would grab it. I followed her into the kitchen, where we keep a rack for keys. She sorted through the keys until she found the basement one and handed it to me. She then went back upstairs while I returned to the basement door. I put the key into the lock, turned it to the right, and tried opening the door again. It still would not open. I went back upstairs and called for my wife to come help me. When she came down, I asked for her help like a kid, since she was the only one who ever locked that door. She walked down with her flashlight, teasing me about not being able to open a wooden door. Before even using the key, she grabbed the handle, gave it one firm push, and the door creaked open. I just stood there stunned. I insisted the door would not open for me, then joked that I must have loosened it for her. She headed back upstairs to the bedroom once again. I stepped into the basement and flipped the light switch, which of course did nothing. With flashlight in hand, I walked toward the boiler room. Once inside, I started flipping the switches back and forth until the basement lights finally turned on. A wave of relief washed over me. I closed the small door to the fuse box. Right after that, I heard a noise coming from outside the boiler room. It was the sound of one of the basement closet doors slowly creaking. I stepped out and looked toward both closet doors. One door was shut, but the other was slightly open. My heart began to race as I slowly moved closer. I stopped about 2 feet from the door and stood still, listening closely. That was the moment it finally hit me. Why would the power switch in our fuse box suddenly be turned off? Then another thought followed. What if the basement door had never been locked at all? What if someone had simply pulled it closed? After a few seconds of silence, I heard a deep breath coming from inside the closet. I immediately ran for the stairs, making sure to lock the basement door behind me this time. I do not think I have ever run up a set of stairs that fast in my entire life. I rushed to our bedroom and shouted through the door, which clearly alarmed my wife. I was definitely not acting calm or brave in that moment. I will admit I was absolutely terrified. I did call the police. Sometime after the call, before officers arrived, we heard the sound of glass shattering outside. I looked out the window, but it was too dark to see anything in the backyard. When the police showed up, I quickly led them down to the basement. By then, the closet door was fully open and completely empty. We also saw broken glass in one corner of the basement, along with items scattered across the floor. Whoever had been hiding in the closet climbed up onto a ledge where we keep collectibles, broke the window, and escaped out of the basement. In short, they got away and were never caught. That night, We left the basement and living room lights on until morning and locked every door in the house. The next day, we had the broken glass repaired. We do not even live in a rough area, which makes it even more frightening to realize something like this could happen to almost anyone. I work as a janitor at a commuter college campus that I will not name for personal privacy and safety reasons. My job involves cleaning hallways, classrooms, and restrooms across different buildings on campus. I usually work later shifts, around 1 to 9, when there are fewer people around. This particular night took place during the summer, and the weather was terrible. The college still runs summer classes, so yes, I work during that season as well. That night happened to be during one of the worst storms we had all year, with powerful winds and heavy rain pouring down nonstop. It was later in my shift, somewhere between 7 and 8 in the evening. At the time, I was working inside the activity center building. It did not host regular classes, only a large ballroom, a small theater, and several general use rooms. It was normally one of the quietest buildings on campus, unless an event was going on. At that hour, I was likely the only person inside. I was cleaning the lower level where the game room was located when suddenly everything went dark. It was completely black, except for the red glow of an exit sign near the stairwell door. The power had clearly gone out. I pulled out my phone and called another janitor who was working in a different building. He told me the power was out where he was too, which meant the storm probably knocked out electricity across the entire campus. After the call, I figured my work downstairs was finished, so I followed the faint exit light. That was when I nearly lost it after seeing someone peek their head around the stairway corner. I called out, thinking it might be another employee, but before I could finish speaking, the person vanished upstairs. I rushed to the stairs to follow them, since I would likely need to lock the building and make sure nobody was still inside. Once I reached the upper floor, I froze. The darkness was overwhelming. Only a few emergency lights were on, and they barely lit more than a small patch of floor beneath them. I began calling out into the dark, empty-sounding building, telling anyone inside that it was closing and they needed to leave. The hallway wrapped in a full circle around the main ballroom, and emergency lights were spaced along the walls. They were spread far apart and extremely dim, offering very little visibility. I began making my way through the hallway, and I was almost certain I heard footsteps trailing behind me. When I reached one of the emergency lights, I turned around, but there was nothing there. I kept moving forward, checking every room along the way. After inspecting the final restroom and finding no one inside, I assumed the building was empty and ready to be locked. As I headed toward the front entrance, I heard footsteps again. This time, there was no doubt in my mind that someone was following me. I turned and saw a shadowy figure standing in the darkness, just past one of the faint lights. I called out and told them they needed to leave the building. The way they stood there made my skin crawl, and then they suddenly turned and ran off in the opposite direction, disappearing into the dark. I had no idea what to do next, but chasing someone down and forcing them out was not part of my job. I continued toward the front door, planning to call campus police as soon as I got outside. When I reached the entrance, I glanced back into the dark lobby. About 20 feet away, I saw the figure again, this time partially hidden behind a door that was slightly open. I call it a silhouette because that was all it was. I could not make out any facial features or details, just a dark shape. I left the building and called campus police. A few officers arrived and searched the place, but they did not find anyone inside. Later that night, I received a phone call that deeply unsettled me. It was campus police again. They asked me to describe the person I had seen as best I could, but I honestly could not give them anything useful. I told them I could not see anything identifiable about the person. That was when they told me something terrifying. There was a killer in the area who was hiding and had recently been seen by a local resident near the college campus. When I ended the call, a chill ran straight through me. I barely slept that night. For a long time afterward, I did not feel safe while working there.